What's going on, everybody? We're back for another episode of Believe in Kentucky. My name is Vinny Hardy. We got Aaron Gershon back from your many travels, man. Toronto, Nashville, all over the place, man. So how you been?
It's probably the busiest July I can remember working this beat, but I can't complain. I mean, two really good weeks. Obviously, Global Jam with the basketball team, and then SEC Media Days getting football kicked off last week. So all good stuff. And we'll have fall camp next week. So I'm pretty jacked up about that.
Absolutely. And we got a friend of the podcast back. She was just on here a few weeks ago, educating us on all things mayhem, all things Women's College World Series, all things who's going to make it to face Oklahoma, which ultimately what happened. Jenna Becerra, Pac-12 Network broadcaster, host Believe in Softball on these Believe Network platforms out here podcasting with us. Jenna, how are you doing this summer?
I'm good. Thank you for having me back. It's funny because I feel like, once the Women's College World Series is over, you're kind of like, oh, okay, it's off season. But then there are so many things that actually happen during the summer for some of these spring sports like softball, like whether it's for collegiate athletics or even just international and pro and travel ball for the youth leagues and things like that. So it's been like kind of sneaky busy.
Yeah, especially with the portal too now.
Oh, man, that's like a full-time job, just staying up to date on the
Absolutely.
portal.
Oh, I hear you 100%. That is totally true.
That's all you do, Aaron. You like
During
tracking and
the
retweeting, and is it a potential
football, I mean,
commit?
yeah, basketball is a little easier because it's a 15, not even, it's a 13 scholarship roster. Kentucky never fills that, but this offseason, man, it was crazy. And then football, it's 20 guys a team. It's nuts. So I know softball and baseball, the portal with just how big the rosters are, even crazier. And if it's your full-time job to keep up with it, especially nationwide, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's possible to keep up with
No.
it, but we do our best,
Yeah. No, it's hard. It's hard.
It's a few slipping by the radar, no matter how intently you try to look at it. I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because it's like and you think about that piece where it's like people coming from other programs and the existing college talent, but then there's also like the incoming freshmen.
Right.
Like for example, Kentucky softball had 3 playing in the Alliance All-Star game, like this summer and they're all getting ready to come in as the fresh faces. So it's like kind of rectifying those two things because you have new talent in so many different ways.
Excellent. And you were talking about summer softball before we started recording. So tell us a little bit about what all that entails, what all is involved, how long it lasts. Just enlighten us on it.
Yeah, well, in terms of college softball, there's lots of things that happen like post Women's College World Series. Like you get all of the like awards are finalized and all of those things. Like, Kentucky, for example, had a couple of All-Americans on the roster this year. No surprise. Kayla Kowalik, Aaron Koffel. Really fun to watch them. So you get kind of those like wrap up things, but then there's also leagues that they can play in, like the Florida Gulf Coast League, for example, where college players are still playing all summer long and they're only adding more and more regions to that. There's travel ball, like I said, so the young ones are playing, and it's nationals time of year right now, so their seasons are kind of coming to a head before they get maybe 2 weeks off, and then they start again in the fall. And then international too. There's been a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, the women's national team for soccer for USA is competing, and the World Cup is huge right now. Yeah. But actually, the World Cup has sort of started for softball as well, in the sense that we had some opening round for qualifiers, and they'll be competing next year. So that's been exciting to watch too.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned, the whole Women's College World Series, and everybody's on it, and then it kind of drops. So, flashing back to that, we hear Omaha for the men, but we know for the ladies, everybody starts their season wanting to get to Oklahoma City. So, tell us about the vibe there. I know you were there for this past World Series, Women's College World Series. The vibe, the stadium, the arena, the tradition. Tell us what it's like when you set foot at the Women's College World Series in OKC.
It was awesome. It's as advertised, and I think every year it only gets bigger and better. And you can even feel that when you're just watching at home a little bit, but to be there is obviously just next level. And because for me, it's like, yes, my alma mater and a team that I cover often, and Stanford was there. Like that made it also very fun. You have all the alumni bases coming out to support. And I think the energy that you feel from every single fan base for all the teams is just like, this is what it's all about, and it makes it so fun. So I was kind of running back and forth, like during the Stanford games, I was, with everybody in the stands, like having fun, but then I'd be like sprinting to the press conferences afterwards and like back to the press box and trying to make it all work, but it was so worth it. It was like that chaos that you're like, wait, but I kind of love this type of chaos. So it was really fun.
That was cool. And when you were on with us, Oklahoma had won 46 in a row or something, somewhere in that vicinity. And they capped it off.
53.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, we were talking about who's playing for second, and and Jalen was on here talking about I would just love to hang around that program just to see how
what's in the water, man.
Yeah.
100%. And they're fun to watch in person too, because I mean, who doesn't want to witness greatness, right? And you can see the way that they play. I think the most impressive thing to me is just like how consistent they are. Like only one loss this entire season, and their win streak like is just going to continue, I think, for a little while. But the fact that they also knew how to face some adversity, because sometimes when you win so much, you can get a little bit comfortable, but I think they accomplished a really hard thing, which is to not allow yourself to get too comfortable, because they had some, and I'm not just saying this because it's my alma mater,
you're right.
A really close game against Stanford a couple times, and it was high stakes. They even had that experience against Clemson, like in super regionals before Oklahoma City, and they still showed up and they still knew how to work through that. So to me, it's like, that's actually one of the most impressive things as well. Not just the skill, right? But that mentality piece.
So would you say, go ahead, man.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think they're going to make I don't really know what the balance of power is between SEC and Big 12, but do you think they're going to be, obviously they have one more year in the Big 12, but is that going to be a tougher switch, or is it going to be easier given what the Big 12 and SEC, the comparison? I know the SEC is like usually 10 deep, but I know obviously the teams in Texas are usually pretty good Big 12 wise. And OU as well.
I would say top to bottom, like if we're looking at just across the board, the SEC probably has more talent that's spread out. However, obviously OU is like head and shoulders kind of above everyone else, period, in every other conference, at least at the moment. But it's really been them, Oklahoma State, Texas, and maybe Baylor kind of mixed in there for the most part in the Big 12 picture. And they've been very, very dominant, which is like understandable too, just based on the way they play. I mean, they're on track to be dominant in the SEC as well. But at the same time, like we have seen some changes, some shockers that have happened in the offseason, like Jordy Ball, the Women's College World Series MVP, leaving to go to Nebraska. Right. And, nobody would have guessed that. It's not a surprise when you think about the fact that she's from there and she wants to grow the game there, and when she kind of laid it all out. But for anyone to want to leave, especially when you're the star, not just a star, but the star, is just a shocker. And so now she's not going to be in the SEC, right? Like she'll end up being in
Big Ten.
The Big Ten. So that's going to be interesting. She would have been a senior at that point. Now she'll be in a totally different conference. I think elevating the Big Ten, though, with her presence there.
I was going to actually ask you about that. Does that change anything for what OU is? I mean, obviously it's their best player, maybe the best player in the country, but they're OU. Are they just going to reload, or are they going to be a little bit human next year because of that?
I mean, they're I don't know if they are human, but no, they are. They're human. They're human. Baylor beat them once. So that was like our one piece of evidence to say that they're human. But I think they have already kind of replaced some of the pitching that they've lost. And I say lost because Alex Storako also graduated. Right. Or she finished her eligibility. So there's that as well. Now she's playing pro. But they've already reloaded with a couple of pitchers as well in that mix. So they have more arms in the circle. They also, at the same time, if you hit that many home runs, you're always going to put your team in the game. And it's not that that was the other thing that was impressive. even when they weren't hitting home runs, like against Stanford, for example, in the World Series, they were still able to find a way to manufacture. So, but generally speaking, like when you have that much power and that big of a threat from the top all the way to the bottom, I mean, you're always going to give your pitchers a chance.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was all of our questions. I'm like, how, of course it's going to boost Nebraska, but how much of a, dent is it going to put in Oklahoma? That was the question. And the fact that before all of our times, I mean, Oklahoma, Nebraska is a huge rivalry across the board. I mean,
that is true.
They played the game of the century in the football back in 69 or 70 or something like that. So before all of us were even born, the fact that you go from OU to Nebraska, that's really interesting. I mean, how did Natty Patty and all of them? Was it hard feelings? Was it just like we understand, or how was the reception to this shocking news when she announced this?
Well, Natty Patty's she's a classy woman, so I think they were very, very supportive. And it was one of those things where people were aware that when she was first coming into college, Nebraska was one of the options that she had to go to. So it's not like no one knew there was any type of previous relationship between Jordy and the team. And Rhonda Revelle is a legend at Nebraska too. Like, she's been a head coach for 40 years there. She played for Nebraska too, played in the first Women's College World Series that was sponsored by the NCAA. Like, she has so much history being a part of that program. So I think for Jordy wanting to really focus on growing the game in that area too, like be in Nebraska, so long it's been a lot of like Southern California talent, maybe some Texas, maybe some Florida, hugely tied to weather, right? And the ability to play year round. But now it's just spreading more and more. And Jordy's one of those, she's Nebraska, hometown girl. And also you think of other people too, like Elena Vaughter for Stanford, Nigeri Kennedy for Stanford. They, one's from Kansas City, one's from Topeka, Kansas. And that area of the country, it's like starting to grow more and more talent at the youth level. And so I think, having that bigger picture in mind, someone like Patty Gasso can understand where the motivation's coming from.
Yeah, I think that's the good part of the transfer portal, because there are some bad parts of it. I think we all know the bad in it, but stories like that, I mean, we've seen it. We've seen different guys leave a school to transfer to go take care of a sick parent, sick family member. I think that's a great use of it. Obviously, we saw it here at Kentucky. Wan'Dale Robinson, football-wise, going actually from Nebraska, ironically, coming home to his home state and just tearing it up for a year. So there are good stories like that. So that one, like at first, and when it balances the power, like you said, and brings it to a different place. Not even just because she's from there, but to get some parity. I just think that's a win-win. And I think we hear all the negatives with the new era of college sports. I think that's a really positive story that should get more praise than it has.
I agree. I definitely agree. I mean, her and Peaches James, who's another legendary pitcher alum from Nebraska, class of 2004, I believe, they just had intersecting streets named after them in their hometown. They're both from the same hometown. And they just had a big ceremony for it, and now Jordy's also someone who's going to Nebraska. So that kind of adds that extra layer to it. So yeah, I agree. Stories like that that's part of the reason you love sports.
She won her a couple titles at Oklahoma. And now, from a team standpoint, from a personal standpoint, she's already kind of done all that. And now, while she's still a collegiate athlete, to kind of put on her cap ambassador of the game. Right. I mean, that is really
exactly
unique.
It's a cool story, man, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I'm sure Nebraska will face some SEC teams, at some point, and that's going to be fun to watch. I mean, they already, she already threw against some SEC teams at Oklahoma and things, but like that's always going to be when the fan bases like that come together, like the Big Red fan base, any SEC fan base, really. It's going to be fun to see.
Yeah, because, so in my opinion, to Kentucky's credit, they've had Oklahoma on the schedule the past couple of years. I mean,
they sure have.
We've come up short, but they've took their cut and took their shot to, kind of measure where you are, and we know where they are and going to see where we are before you get into conference play. So I kind of tip my cap to Coach Lawson and them for even doing that.
They'll have no choice pretty soon, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, Coach Lawson's still one of my favorite Twitter follows of all time. She's, I think, out recruiting right now in Southern California, and she's had some hot takes about traffic on the 405. And as somebody who grew up down there, traveled on the 405 many times growing up for travel ball, it's very, very entertaining. But no, she's definitely, I love what she's doing there. I think she's another person who has been a pretty steady, stable presence in the SEC. Especially as more and more women and former players have kind of taken those leading roles as head coaches.
Because hate to give Tennessee credit for anything, but the Weeklies have been there for forever. They're kind of an established, recognizable name, even maybe the outsiders in softball. And Coach Lawson, like you said, decade and a half at Kentucky, the impact, the growth she's brought to the program and still wanting to continue to bring to it. So, she would be in that mix as well, as far as, been there and as far as been there tenured for a long time, kind of like Stoops in football. He's the longest tenured coach outside of Nick Saban in the SEC. So,
that's right.
Yeah. I think it's huge when tenured coaches can still get better too. I think that makes a big difference. I mean, we've seen that with Patty Gasso. That's part of what's made her so great. But when you think about, for example, I saw, and it better in all kinds of ways, not just like the product on the field, but as a program as well, because you're kind of the CEO of the program, not just the coach, really. At least that's how it is now. And with Coach Lawson, I look at, for example, the highest average total attendance that Kentucky softball has had in the past 8 years this past year. They average over 1,500 people per game, so things like that, like you can see that growth in multiple ways. And I think those are important too.
Yeah, I think that's how you win in college sports now. You have to adapt, and especially now. I mean, we've beaten the transfer portal to death, but now, and with softball, especially, the SEC schools, Oklahoma, NIL being a factor, and keeping, if one girl makes more than the other, you got to make sure it doesn't cause a locker room issue, and that's hard to navigate in any sport and any level. So, let alone in college. So, yeah, these coaches, the ones who adapt, are going to do the best. And to see some of the longer tenured ones across college sports, we've obviously seen it with OU softball, seen it with some of these SEC softball programs, and obviously I can go rattle off some football and basketball examples. But those are the coaches that are going to win. You got to adapt to everything, and not to mention the game, how it's ever so changing on the field. And those are the winners right now.
Yeah, definitely.
And I get it with the money, and you being in the locker room not too long ago playing for Stanford. Do you think had different levels of salary been in play? Do you think it would have caused? So, I mean, human nature is what it is, but do you think y'all would have, pushed that aside and still pretty much had the same dynamic in the locker room? Because if you go pro, you got to deal with that. You're not going to be making the most when you go pro. So part of me is like, look, everybody wants to say, if you're making money and they're going to be dissension. I think, to me, it's a little bit blown because you got to learn it at some point. Do you think it would have changed the chemistry in your locker room during your time at Stanford?
It's a new layer to a dynamic. Like, I don't think you can ignore that. I will say, at least from my personal experience, we kind of had a culture where we didn't know how much scholarship money each person had. And because softball is a little bit different, a lot of football, it's either full ride or walk on. For softball and baseball, it's different. You can carve up different percentages. Yep. Exactly. We didn't talk about that. Like, we were all just teammates. We never went into like, oh, well, this person has a full ride and that person, no one ever talked about that. And I don't think anyone really cared. But when you add in sort of this stuff now, it does feel like, they're just essentially pro players. I think it's one of those things where I believe that they should get, if you're going to make money off of their actual name and likeness, like you're selling jerseys with these people's names and numbers, absolutely they should get a cut of it. Mm-hmm. But where it gets tricky is the pay to play part, I think, because it's like, well, that's not really about name, image, likeness. That's just about literally paying you to play, which would make you a professional. So I think that's where it gets tricky. I think that more schools are trying to start things like collectives where they can potentially sort of unite athletic departments or at least teams, and maybe even do some negotiations to where it's for the whole team. Maybe it's like not just for some individuals. I think those are good for at least in terms of team dynamics. But I would imagine like it can't help but affect it. But I think it's about like testing the culture. It's like, well, can your culture survive something like that? And also, like, does your athletic department have the resources to support those types of things? Because I think we had like no guidelines going into this whole NIL thing.
Still barely do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. So is it, you already talked about Oklahoma's winning streak probably continuing on for a while. So are we going ahead and penciling them in for another title? Or not saying they go undefeated, but are they pretty much a shoe-in to get back to OKC and win it again? Or
I think to get back to OKC, I'm very confident. I think going into 2023, we all kind of knew they were going to three-peat, right? And it was a big deal. No one's ever four-peated. I don't even know if we refer to it that way, but yeah, no one's ever done that. Yeah, what's it even called? Like, that's how good they are. We haven't even named it yet. But UCLA did three-peated at the end of the 80s, early 90s. And then now Oklahoma has. No one's ever done the 4 times in a row thing because it's really freaking hard to do that. Like, to have that kind of talent and have the luck for it to go your way too. Like, because there is luck in sports. There is, to a certain level. You try to do as much as you can to make it go your way as much as possible, but so I don't know if I'm comfortable quite yet, especially because we may have some more transfer things happening across the country to say that they're a shoe-in to win 2024. But I think to get to Oklahoma City, I'm pretty confident in that.
And the contenders, the usual suspects of everybody nipping at their heels, or do you see a dark horse contender maybe kind of putting things together to where they can be up there with the UCLAs and the Stanfords that maybe nobody else is really seeing right now?
Well, yeah, because UCLA lost so early this last year, we kind of didn't get that experience. And now they've lost a couple of their top pitchers just due to their, they finally graduated with Megan Framo and Brooke Yanez and things. But I think I wouldn't call Stanford a dark horse at this point, obviously, because they made it to Oklahoma City this past year. But they weren't necessarily on everyone's list at the beginning of the season to do that. This year, they have done a very rare thing for them, which is getting a huge transfer. The admissions are really difficult. Normally, they can't really mess around with the transfer portal. Like, it's not something they're very familiar with because it's really hard to get people in. But they got Taryn Kern from Indiana, who was the Big Ten Player of the Year this past season. She was, I think, number 2 overall in terms of home runs in all of college softball. And the number 1 person was Kiki Malloy, who played it for longer because she went to the World Series, right? Yep. And, it's at a position they need in the infield too. They need infielders after having graduated some. So with that, she's a huge addition offensively. And then, they have some of the best pitching in the country. So I really do think that, not surprised if we see them there again too.
Just so you had Courtney Gano, Washington assistant coach, on your latest episode of Believe in Softball. So still cranking out episodes and giving good content on the podcast. What you got planned for these upcoming episodes or things you got in the works?
Yeah, Courtney's great. She's really awesome. I love having people who have so many different experiences within softball too, like at the college level, international, coaching, pro, all that stuff. But the next one, so Courtney was episode 124 overall. The next one is our 125th episode, which I'm still wrapping my head around because it's hard to believe. No pun intended. But Tara Henry is going to be the guest. She is the managing editor of D1 Softball. She's also the head coach of the Great Britain women's national team, and she won a national championship at UCLA. So she's one of those people where it's like, hey, you've seen a lot. You've heard a lot. Let's hear from you. So I'm excited for that. And you asked about summer softball earlier. I think the pro space is so overlooked during the summers, especially. So that's big. Athletes Unlimited is starting this weekend, their championship series. The WPF has been playing all summer long, including, Kayla Kwolek's in the WPF. She's playing her rookie season for for pro, and it's really fun to watch. It's all the college players we love getting to play at an even higher level. So I just wanted to plug that as well for some summer softball.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
One last thing I've got to ask about you, just going back to your playing days, showing up to practice every day, what came naturally to you where it just came easy and that you enjoy going in and practicing and, hey, I love it. And what was maybe the hole in your game to where I gotta bust it and really work at this that you didn't like working on, but you knew you needed to work on in order to get better, in order to continue to keep your spot, continue to play? What were those two things that, were happening during your time playing?
It's an interesting question because you're so right. It's like we don't like failing, right? So we don't like maybe having to work out the kinks sometimes, or it's not fun, right? Necessarily sometimes. Other times it is fun. I had a lot of fun always with defense. Defense came really naturally to me. I loved it. I was an infielder. I loved throwing. I played third base a lot, so I loved throwing out slappers, for example. Like I had a lot of fun doing that every day. Like I enjoyed it. You get a little sore, you get a little tired because we were definitely getting like ground balls just shot at us over and over and over. But for the most part, I loved it. And I liked hitting. But my freshman year, I definitely had a little bit of a mental block where I was sort of just overanalyzing everything. It wasn't necessarily as physical as it was mental. And then later in my career, when I just sort of let that go and just let myself enjoy the moment and not overanalyze certain things or not think about results, that's when I actually started to do better and then start to enjoy it more. But the thing that came easy was definitely defense.
Okay. It's always, we love, like you said, we love doing what comes natural, what we're already good at, and it doesn't take as much hard work to keep that sharp. But that other thing over here that, like you said, so it's fun, the mental game in the game that every athlete has to deal with, finishing layups with your left hand, dribbling with your left hand, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. There's little things too, like base running, right? People don't realize actually how much does go into base running. And we used to do not just running mechanics, but also being able to read the ball off the bat, knowing the situations, like, oh, how good of an arm does that outfielder have? Can I take an extra base? Can I not? There's so much that goes into it. And there's a lot of little things like that, especially in games like softball and baseball. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing. Last thing, in summer, you were nominated for the Utility Player of the Year award for broadcasting, and you and Troy Clardy for the best local booth. You guys tweeted that out. So I'm getting some recognition, deservedly so, for all the work you do on the Pac-12 network and everything you do TV-wise and the podcast. So good job on the recognition that y'all got for
That's
that.
awesome. Congratulations.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, and Troy's fun because we work together at Stanford covering the softball program. We work together at the Pac-12 network. He has a tree cast on Believe covering, so we have a lot of overlapping areas in our professional lives. And so it's definitely cool for, to have a partner like that as well.
Yeah. I've seen TreeCast on there. I have to pop in there and check him out one time. Let's do some episodes and see what we're talking about.
He hasn't had me on yet, now that I think about it.
Oh, boy.
So maybe, I just realized that. Yeah.
Cardinal beef right here. Y'all just get nominated for an award, and now there's beef because he should have been had you on a long time ago. What is he doing? Come on, Troy.
What is he doing? I know.
Troy. It's just bashing. They're not here to defend himself. I don't even know him. It's just bashing because we know you, and he should have had you on.
Thank you. I love that you're just ride or die.
Team Jenna. We don't know Troy. You said he's a good dude, so I believe it. But then you say he didn't have you on, so now I'm conflicted.
Nobody's perfect,
No, that's true.
You're right. Jenna, thank you so much for coming on with us again, and we'll have to have you on again. We'll be up 3-0 next time we have you on, unless Troy gets on the ball and gets you on it.
That's true.
Having you on and getting your insights on all things softball.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. This is fun as always. And really excited for not just softball, but Kentucky softball too, as always, this coming season. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we got to get Coach Lawson on. Speaking of,
oh yeah,
we're kind of like Troy. We ain't had her on yet, so
Yeah, see, that's okay. That's your job.
There you go.
Troy
No
has
one's
his-
perfect.
That's right. Nobody's perfect.
Coach Lawson came on earlier this season, and she had a really good time. She loved it. I think she'd be a great guest.
Yeah, now her media day is always fun. She's great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jenna. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and looking forward to seeing all your content once the season starts too.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Anytime. Appreciate it.
Jenna Becerra, Believe in Softball, Pac-12 Network, ESPN. She's everywhere doing her thing, and appreciate her taking the time to hop on. Shout out to our guy, Jalen Whitlow. I forgot to mention that he was not on with us this evening, but we'll look forward to him coming back next week. He is busy doing the offensive coordinator, coaching, fall camp thing, so.
It's perfect timing because fall camp will be starting that week. So we'll get Jay right before media day on Friday. So all good.
That's it. We've got to welcome you back because you were out covering media days, but then got to do the family thing a little bit last week. So
yeah, it worked out that my dad was in Nashville too on a work trip. So we got to spend some time together, got in media days, and it was a great week in Music City, though. It was hot as all hell. And I guess that's kind of what's going on everywhere. But man, was it hot in Nashville. But it was a good week, man. It was a lot of fun. And it's going to be moving to Dallas next year. So it'll be a plane ride next time. But it was a great time in Nashville.
Yeah. So what were some of your takeaways, something that stood out? So you of course, there for all 4 days. So anything that jumped out at you?
I think I'll go with Kentucky last. But first, I think the biggest thing, and I don't know if you and Jalen got to it last week. I know you guys had Keenan on, so it may not have come up. But Jimbo Fisher was – I really think the coaches did a pretty good job for the most part at not having any big slip-up moments or any big headline. Like last year, let's call it like it was, Mark Stoops made a mistake with the Shane Beamer comments. I think we could all agree with that. South Carolina used it as fuel. And I talked to the South Carolina guys. They don't like Mark Stoops. It is what it is. So there was none of that going on, really. But Jimbo Fisher had one nugget that stood out, and that was, we all, when he hired Bobby Petrino, we were all like, oh, how's that dynamic going to work? You got two old heads, two really experienced guys who know offense. I know Jimbo, the last couple of years at Texas A&M haven't been great, but he has a very good track record. He's a good offensive coach, historically at least, and already non-committal and giving the play calling to Bobby Petrino. So I think that one rolled some heads. That one was interesting, and also Texas A&M, man, there's just like I don't know what's going on down there. All three of their players came out like. I've seen guys wear shades before, and it's a style thing. I get it. But all three of them had the same pair of sunglasses, and they wore it for every interview. I thought that was – I don't know what's going on at A&M. I haven't been – I know Jalen thinks they might bounce back. I don't see it. But, Jalen knows more ball than me. He'll probably be right. But so that one was interesting. I think not like something that stood out, nothing crazy, but there's obviously a lot of South Carolina buzz. And, I get it. They had a really, really strong – finish to the season. What they did against Tennessee and Clemson was impressive. There's no taking away from that. And they played Notre Dame really tough. I know they lost the game, but it was a good game. But 38 new players is a large number. And not only 38 new players, but Beamer pointed out they might start freshmen at almost every spot. And he said every position. That's exaggerated because we all know Spencer Rattler's their starting quarterback. Although they have Hemingway at defensive tackle, there's some guys, some solidified vets who are returning. Juice Wells, Joyner. So they got some dudes. But 38 new guys, that's a lot. And a lot of freshmen they're going to be starting. So that's why I'm cautiously optimistic on South Carolina. I personally had them I picked them to finish fourth behind Kentucky in the East. But that one stood out to me. And then Lane Kiffin just being Lane Kiffin with the NIL stuff, with the transfer portal stuff. He just gets it, man. I love Lane Kiffin personally. I think it's refreshing that he just says what's on his mind. He doesn't hold back any punches. If he's going to get fined, he'll get fined. He'll tweet crap. Like, I love it. I know it used to get him into trouble. And I think he's done a good job of maybe mellowing his outgoingness, if that makes sense. But I just love a guy who tells it how it is. I always respect that. That's something I know Mark Stoops, will not give away all, like when they have an injury, he won't tell us everything. But I feel like Mark Stoops is one of the more transparent coaches I've covered. And I really respect that about him too. So that one, that I love Lane. I just love Lane. His press conferences are always a joy. So that was fun. And then, yeah, that was really those were the things that stood out most for me, just from a conference-wide perspective. And then, Kentucky one. It was really cool. I didn't even think about it until I think they tweeted that out, that all three of the guys that represented the Cats were from Kentucky at Media Day, and Oxendine, obviously Radcliffe, JJ Weaver, Louisville, and then Eli from Nicholasville. So I thought that was a cool touch that Kentucky did that. I think, if I had to predict, I thought maybe Trevin Wallace would have been there, something like that. But when they put it out that way, I kind of liked it. So I thought all three of those guys did a really nice job representing the program, and spoke what was on their mind. JJ didn't slip up. Proud of him for that. He's given some bulletin board material in the past. So, but they were all a pleasure to be around. And yeah, I think, and I'll let you get in here after this, but I think the biggest takeaway I had, and it was a story I was chasing going into Kentucky's day, was, last year, this was kind of the event that I think set the tone for what happened. And remember, they were picked to finish second, and they finally got the respect they were calling for and deserved, because they had 2 10-win seasons. But Eli Cox, I asked him straight up, did it get to your heads? And he said it was impossible not to read. And for him, he was just talking about the team as a whole. It's impossible not to read things. It's impossible not to buy into the hype. And he said something along the lines of there was some maybe complacency for winning 10 games in 21 and then having the respect already in 22. So, he talked about wanting to get back to the underdog mentality. When I asked, Coach Stoops a similar question, he didn't go with the underdog thing. And I get that. That's coach stuff. But I thought he gave a really good answer about how he was upset and took responsibility for how the team didn't handle adversity well, whether that be the adversity of finally not being, that was the first time, I think, and definitely in Stoops' tenure, I don't know when the last time was, they went into the season ranked, and not just were they pitched to pick second, they came in, I think, 20, and then they jumped to 12 or 7. I don't know how high they eventually, I think they got to 7 going into Ole Miss. So there were expectations from day one. So that was one piece of adversity. Then we all know what happens with Will Levis. That's adversity. I know Trevin Wallace and D-Jack did a great job, but losing 2 leaders on the field and Square and Jones, that's adversity. And clearly, the leadership might have messed. I mean, the defense played really well, but who knows what's going on in the locker room to hold guys accountable. So I really appreciated that answer from Mark Stoops, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So that was what stood out to me most, I think, from Kentucky's perspective.
And it's still a testament to how far they've come to
win 7 still.
7 and 5 be a down
bad
year considering all that. I mean, that 25 years ago, we were dreaming. Look, it would take you 2 years to win 7 games. You go
That's
3 and
right.
8 and 4 and 7. So it's still progress, even though it's not where they wanted to be and where the fan base thought they would be. Going back to Jimbo, I'm one that thinks that him and Bobby aren't going to work. I might be wrong. They might score 48 points a game, but it's just 2 strong-willed guys. To me, Bobby's angling for another head coaching job. That's why he's trying to, like everybody at Alabama gets a launching pad to a new job, come through and rehabilitate yourself and get a job. I think that's what Bobby's trying to do. But I just to me, it's going to be a tug of war over control all year. And I might be completely wrong, and they might just, be harmony and just, happy, joy all year, but I'll have to see that to believe it.
I'm with you, man. I actually, if Fisher gave up the play calling, I really like the hire, but I don't think he's gonna, man. They're like you said, and look, Jimbo, I don't know how old he is now. He's obviously been doing this thing for a long time. He's 57, right? So he's won a national championship. He had Jameis Winston. He did some good things. I mean, I know it was the COVID year, but 2020 they went 9-1, and you could have made an argument that they should have belonged in the playoffs. So, I mean, he's done some good things offensively in recent years. It hasn't just been at Florida State. So, but I don't know if it's going to mesh. And you look at that schedule, Obviously, they're in the SEC West, but they also have to go to Knoxville this year. They play Ole Miss on the road, which teams struggle down there. They have to go to Baton Rouge, for the annual rivalry week game. They get Auburn at home. We'll see what Auburn is. Obviously, Arkansas is always a neutral site, and they do get Alabama at home this year. But look, I mean, at Tennessee as your crossover game, that's not fun. Going to Oxford's never easy. We all know, going to LSU when they're good is arguably the toughest place to play in the entire country. So, I don't know if their schedule is really going to – and they have to go to Miami too. And, Miami, I know they beat Miami last year, but we'll see what happens this year. It's just – that's not an easy schedule to navigate either. So, I'm not – again, I know Jalen's high in A&M, so we'll see who's right between us. That'll be our little preseason disagreement. But I personally picked A&M to finish 7th again. I just am not – I'm not feeling it, man. I don't see it. I know they have a lot of talent. I know now they gained experience last year, but I just don't see it working out. I just don't.
Yeah. So, and then we had Jimbo. We had Vanderbilt getting 8th place votes, first place votes.
Oh my God.
They got 1 the year before. Now they got 8. So
look, they're getting, that's what sucks too, is they're, it's a joke, but they're getting better. You look at their roster and you look at what Clark Lee's doing down there, they're getting better. I'm not saying they're going to go out and win 8 games, 9 games, compete in the East. Hell no, I'm not saying that. I think they're a fringe bowl team. I think they have a shot to get to the postseason. They kind of made that clear at media days that was their goal for the year, and I think it's attainable. But yeah, that's why I released my ballot, because I like to be on record. I have nothing to hide. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Last year, I'd love to find my ballot from last year. I know it was hideous. I think I had LSU, and I know a lot of people weren't high on LSU, but I think I had them last in the West, and they won it. So, and I had Kentucky. I bought into the Kentucky hype. I've had them second. So, yeah, I whatever. But I don't know, man. It really ticks me off that people don't take it seriously. I know it's fun. Everyone likes to vote and they get to make everyone loves opinions and whatnot. But I feel like it's making a mockery of what Vanderbilt is building, which is something positive for that program. It's not fair to the teams that do deserve those votes and do deserve to, I know Kentucky didn't necessarily use the respect in the right way. They let it become a distraction or be too high on themselves, whatever. But some teams do deserve that respect, especially I don't know, Tennessee, for example. I think they do deserve to be. I know how you feel about Tennessee, but I do feel like they deserve the credit for what they did last year and some of the pieces they have back to be voted to finish 2nd in the East this year. I do feel like on the other side that LSU. I know that it's going to be hard to say they picked Bama, but I was glad to see them come close in the voting because what they did last year was really impressive. I don't love that 8. No, I don't think anyone deep down, and maybe there is someone and whatever, but I don't think anyone deep down thinks Vanderbilt is going to finish above 5th in the East, let alone win it.
Yeah. You can get better and improve and still might not have the wins to show for it. I think that's kind of where they are right now. And Tennessee, had to give them credit, but you win 11 games, you deserve the credit that comes with that. Just like we sit here and talk about Kentucky getting respect for having 2 10-win seasons, but you can't dismiss Tennessee winning 11. You can't dismiss LSU coming in and winning the division in Kelly's first year. That's going to bring you a little more panache or, gusto or whatever that comes with it. So, but Joe Milton's got big shoes to fill. Maybe Heupel has him where he wants him to be because, Hooker coming from Virginia Tech, I never saw that transformation from Hooker to Blacksburg going to Knoxville. Maybe
we saw him. We saw him.
Yeah. And when they announced he was transferring to Tennessee, I'm like, okay, but, I wasn't worried about it. That's fine.
No.
So if he can do the same thing with Milton, who can throw it from across the country,
for a mile. Yeah,
but can't throw it. The touch pass to the guys off the flat, the little short stuff. If they got him fixed on intermediate and short, well then look out.
Yeah.
Do they have him consistently able to do it? We're gonna see.
We don't know yet. They're
gonna cruise through the first third of the schedule before they get really tested, and then we'll we'll see what we
We'll
got.
reassess then.
So yeah, hate to give him
and I
credit,
think
but I gotta give him credit, but Milton is a big piece as to will they sustain what they did last year or not.
And I know obviously their style of offense is going to trip up defenses, and they get Brew McCoy back, but they also lose Jalen Hyatt, who was the best receiver in the entire country, winning the Blinktokoff Award last year. So that's a big loss. Cedric Tillman, I know, was banged up for the first half of the year, but they lose him. So I believe the tight end Fant might have moved on as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So but their offensive line's in good shape, their defensive backfield, and I think their defense was a little bit underrated even at times last year. I know at one point they had, I think, one of the worst pass defenses, but that was a lot of it was because they were up so big and they were just playing prevent defense. They were kind of letting teams, they're just keeping in front of them. But yeah, there's definitely, Joe Milton's got a lot to prove, but I just think Tennessee has proven themselves to the point where they earn that number 2 spot. I think Kentucky, has been the better I still think Kentucky overall has been the better program the last 7 years, despite the, Tennessee owns them head to head. That is what it is right now. But I think Kentucky's passed them as a program, but going into this year, it was hard for me to not pick Tennessee second, but I still see Kentucky as the team to finish third at worst in this division, just because of what I was saying about South Carolina. There's not much continuity as you would think going on. New offense coordinator too. So I know Marcus Satterfield wasn't necessarily the most popular guy in Columbia, South Carolina. I think a lot of people were kind of happy that a divorce happened there, and it ended up the way it did, where you didn't have to fire him. But Dwell Loggins, he's his NFL track record is rich. It's like as bad as Rich Scangarillo. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens down there. And then you look at the rest of the East, man. I think I've talked about it as nauseum. I am as low on Florida as anybody. I just don't see it. I see a really good backfield. I mean, ETN and Johnson are as good as a duo there is in the SEC. Is Johnson the kid from Louisiana? Who's the kid that followed him from Louisiana? I believe his last name is Johnson. I'm going to double check on that because I don't want to be wrong. But we've talked about the worries we had with Graham Mertz when he was a Kentucky target. That translates to what Florida's doing. They did lose some pieces on the offensive line, though I still think overall they're going to be in pretty good shape. Yeah, Montrell Johnson. So I did have that right. But I just don't see it at Florida right now. And I believe their defense coordinator, or at least they had co-defense coordinators. And I want to say that Patrick Toney, who was one of them, moved on this offseason. Yeah, it sure did. So even they have a coordinator change with Austin Armstrong taking over. So, I'm not big on them. Missouri, I think their defense has a chance to be top 5 in the SEC with what they have returning.
Death row defense.
They have a great defense.
Death row defense.
Yeah.
That's what Eli called it. I didn't see that anywhere written at all, and he says it from the podium. Maybe that's what they're going with, but yeah, the death row. That was
so funny. Yeah, but
okay,
look, it's good though. I mean, look, Abrams, Draney, the cornerback's a stud. The defensive line, they lost McGuire, but they have some studs coming back there. They're in good shape on defense, but I'm not high on the quarterback situation they've got. We obviously saw what Brady Cook was. I thought he could do some things with his legs, but I don't know. We'll see if Luther Burton takes the next step. But Dominic Lovett goes to Georgia. I don't know how they're going to score points. And then we talked about Vandy already. So I definitely think Kentucky and Tennessee are going to be the teams that can challenge Georgia the best, with South Carolina lurking. But I really think, obviously it's Georgia and everyone else, but I do think the rest of the SEC is pretty close together. So while I'm high on Tennessee enough to have them finish second, I'm not crowding them, in that spot by any means.
Yeah. No, in the moving around and, networking and talking to different people, was there a lot of buzz or talk about the Georgia versus the AJC thing going on down there at Media Days?
Yeah, there were jokes about it. I mean, there were definitely some jokes about it. Just Georgia, I forget, there was a comment. There was a question to Kirby. I'll have to find the transcript because it was really funny. But someone mentioned, now you're going to say, I have you to pick, it was a 7-5 joke floating around there. But look, Georgia, I think everyone down there knows how good they are, and until someone knocks them off, I don't think anyone's confident that they're going to beat Georgia this year. And I'd never really the one thing I found interesting with Georgia, I'd never been around Brock Bowers before. I don't even think I've listened to a Brock Bowers interview. He is like the most humble, short, like he doesn't say much, but he's humble. He's all about his team. He doesn't want to talk about how good he is because he's probably, I've said it for 2 years, I think he's the best player in college football. He's like, that's the type of kid that's dangerous, man. He's got it. You can tell he has that chip on his shoulder, but he doesn't let you know that. He's just very humble. He wants to pass all the credit. Yeah, that was really, really impressive for me seeing. Yeah, here's the Smart joke. But yeah, I was really impressed with Kirby Smart. He said he's something along the lines of, he said, I don't know who this guy is, but he told me y'all are going 7-5 this season. And he asked that to Kirby. So yes, so there were a lot of those type of jokes. But what was interesting too, going a little bit off Georgia, there were a lot of Oklahoma and Texas beat writers down here, and they're getting ready to, join this conference. And they were kind of getting a vibe on, there's definitely some. Steve Sarkisian is obviously Lane Kiffin, Nick Saban know him really well. OU, there was a lot of OU questions from Mark Stoops, as you'd imagine. So it was really interesting to kind of get those guys into this SEC Media Days, and there were a lot of questions about those two teams joining and just how even deeper this conference is going to be. And also some questions, and I was able to ask them as well, just about the scheduling going forward and how, there's going to be teams playing in different places. Rivalries are going to end, rivalries are going to continue, which one should, which one shouldn't. So those, I think, were all kind of the interesting. And by the way, both Missouri and South Carolina, I talked to Abrams Draney from Missouri. I'm tripping on the defensive lineman I spoke to from Mizzou. I'll get that in a second. But both Kai Kroger and Tanika Hemingway from South Carolina, and they all said that they're rivals with Kentucky. There's no doubt about it. And South Carolina kind of went into, it being a little personal last year with the sunglass thing, whatever. But Missouri definitely there's still that Darius Robinson from Missouri. Those, so there's something with those two games. But it is interesting. The Missouri players didn't love that Kentucky's not on their 24 schedule next year. So we'll see if that one's picked up in 25. I'm okay either way. But personally, yeah, it was all interesting as always. SEC Media Days. There's not, there's a lot of reserve. You don't want to say something that turns into bulletin board material or gets you trending on Twitter. But there were still some nuggets in there that it's never a dull moment.
Yeah. I think, but with Georgia and AJC, the part where Georgia had them demand a retraction, with the headline, I was wondering if anybody was talking about that.
Yeah, there were definitely questions.
And has any of the teams, the coaches, been upset with anything you've written? I mean, not maybe they were demanding retraction, but have you had,
right?
Hey, man, Aaron, come on, man, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there was not much of that. There wasn't really any complaining. I mean, there were definitely questions, just, nothing about the retractions, but stuff about, they've had a bad offseason off the field. I mean, I don't think anyone can deny that. And unfortunately, a life was lost. And, but there were definitely questions to both Kirby and the players, like, what's the accountability like? How are you addressing this? And they kind of just gave the status quo answers, and and Kirby did acknowledge that some of the speeding stuff had to stop, and there was accountability, I thought, but they weren't I was happy to see they weren't like, what's the word I'm looking for, they weren't confrontational about it. They didn't there was nothing like that, so that was good to see. Sometimes it does go that way, as we've seen. Nate Oates, I think, is an example of that. So
always defensive,
right. So there was some. I think there was some good accountability taken there, and Kirby, before he, his opening statement, obviously touched on the death of a player and a staffer and how awful that was. So I was pretty satisfied with what Georgia was saying up there. I've heard a lot worse when things go south. Let's just say that.
Yeah. So I was just wondering if there was one of those topics, but it was like a week before the event anyway, so it was
the
news cycle for a few days anyway.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, maybe remember there are other rooms that there's an electronic media room, which is for TV and radio that I'm not included in. So it might have come up in those. I can't say I've watched all the interviews from there. I watched a couple, just the ones I was interested in. Yeah, I didn't catch Kirby. I caught Brock Bowers in there, but not Kirby.
And Kirby from the podiums said that Brock was one of the quietest players you'd ever meet. And he said, my challenge
to get three sentences.
Media. Yeah. So did you go to catch every coach from the podium, and then how did you work?
Yeah.
What's your process down there?
That's a good question. Yeah, for all the teams not named Kentucky, sat through their just pressers at the podium. I didn't have anything to ask the coaches really this year. I kind of let those speak for themselves. I was focused more on the players. And then, for the teams that Kentucky does play, I try to get something that, it's a lot easier now with the portal. Like with Vandy, I was able to ask their representatives about Ray Davis and about what type of guy they're getting on and off the field. I was able to talk to J.C. Lapham of Alabama, the offensive lineman, and ask him what they're getting in Tanner Bowles. I think that was it for transfers, but like South Carolina and Mizzou, I went with the angle of the permanent rivalry because of how chippy it's been. I'm trying to think who else. Florida for the second straight year didn't really want to say anything, so that was kind of a waste. Though I did find interesting, and it wasn't even my question. Someone asked the corner that was there from Florida if about the hardest environments he's played in. He chose Kentucky and South Carolina, and that I guess I'm trying to think where else. I guess I'd imagine he would have played. He's been there 2 years, so that he had to have played in Baton Rouge by now. You would think. So I couldn't believe he didn't just say that. But, we all know what the atmosphere was when he did come to Kentucky in 21 when they won and the Trevin Wall. I mean, so I kind of get the answer there, and the 8 false starts too. So that one was interesting from Florida. And then when it came to teams that Kentucky's not playing, I more listened in to see if there was anything just interesting to talk on here about or tweet about, something fun going on. Alabama, though, J.C. Lapham was talking about how they're going to go 12-0 and win the whole thing. So that was interesting. Alabama's pretty confident, which they should be. I know that Georgia's passed them lately, but it is what he also said something along the lines of like he respects Georgia, but they haven't established what Alabama has, which I don't know. It's getting close. It's getting close. I know they haven't won 5 yet, but it's getting pretty close. So those were interesting. But yeah, that's kind of my approach with it. And Georgia guys, I didn't, there's not much that you don't ask Georgia about other teams when they're Georgia. They're above everyone. So, but I did go, like I said, I went and listened to Brock Bowers for a while because I had never been around him, and I was just interested to hear the type of guy he was, especially after the comment you brought up that Kirby said. It made me want to listen to him, and he was interesting, and that. Or he was interesting. He was humble. He's a good guy. And then with Kentucky, we get to meet with the guy. We get to meet with Stoops and the players before anybody else and do a local media session, and that was great. Stoops was kind of just mingling with us before and after, so I got to talk to him just off the record about fun stuff, and that was cool. So I appreciated him. I always appreciate when coaches are real with you and they're just real people, and you kind of forget your job and their job and have conversations. So it was good to talk to Mark like that. And then also, get some time with him, and then with Ox, Eli, and JJ before they went and did their whole, rounds and all that. But when it comes to the podium and the media room with the Kentucky guys, I kind of let the the SEC guys, the guys who don't get to talk to them every week, have their time, because I'll have that question answered in August, I'm sure. So media days on Friday. So
yeah. That's it. Well, good stuff, man. Glad you're back. Glad you're getting to exhale for a few more days before it's time to ramp it up. So
yeah, media day will be the 4th, and I think back-to-back days, right? We got fan day on the 5th. So if you're around or wanting to travel up to that, they haven't released the times, but typically, I believe, they do the autograph signing in the field house, which I assume is good to go, and they're going to have it in the field house. Usually it's at 9 a.m., so obviously got to line up before that to get in, but the whole team will sign. You'll get to watch them. I don't know. It'll probably be a lightly padded practice at that point in the week, so you'll get a little bit of a first glimpse. And I think Fan Day is a great event. I always enjoy covering that practice, and that's when you really start to feel it. I think Media Day and Fan Day is when it's like, all right, man, we're going here. Football's around the corner, so I'm looking forward to next weekend for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to continuing to bring y'all content about everything coming and going as far as Kentucky is concerned. Appreciate all your coverage and insight, AG. Glad you got to have safe travels and looking forward to keeping this going. Like you said, it's that time. And
this is that time.
Keep tuning in. We're Believe.com, Spotify, Stitch, wherever you get your podcast. We're doing the live thing on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. So comment and go on there. Got some people subscribing and all that. So appreciate it.
Yeah, the engagements have been up. I've seen that. So I do appreciate that. I've been taking a look and it's been working out pretty well with the live. So I appreciate it all.
Yeah. So appreciate that. I'm glad I finally got that switched over where it wasn't just the audio. You see a lot of other podcasts in the network. You see Believe tweeting it out, and it's the live shot, the Twitter shot. So we finally got on board and got our live situation in effect. So every episode, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for Believe in Kentucky. So we'll keep on doing that. And hope y'all enjoy it. You can listen or watch, whatever you choose to do. You got the option to check us out however you feel like it. But man, Aaron, we'll do this thing again next week.
Next Wednesday.
See whatever happens between now and then. See if we get that Yahtzee from Northwestern. Who knows? We'll see.
That's right.
He's taking visits, and that would
position of need. Linebacker still inside backer. Need some depth there.
Absolutely. So if that goes down, we'll talk about that. And y'all check Aaron out at the Cat's Paws. Always putting out good content there as well.
And get your yearbooks. They are out, by the way. They should be everywhere. They're online. They're out. They look great. Really happy those are done. We're already getting started on the basketball one. I actually hammered out a lot of that today. So get those, please.
What's the for the online people out of state? What do you got to do?
I will give you the exact link, but let's see. Give me 2 seconds here to give you the correct link because it's different than the 24/7 site. It is shopcatspaws.com. That is where you go for subscriptions. If you want to subscribe to the magazine as well, just get the yearbook for basketball, football combo. Just get the football yearbook. Just get the basketball yearbook. Whatever you want to do on there. It's shopcatspaws.com. And then locally, every 5-star gas station in the Commonwealth. There's select Kroger's, I think mostly in Lexington. But if you go to an article that Daryl wrote on the Cat's Paws site, every single location that you can buy it in person is listed there. But I know for sure every 5-star gas station in the state, some Kroger's in Lexington, Barnes & Noble in Lexington, Kentucky branded. Those are just some off the top of my head, I know.
That'll work, man. Sounds good. I think I'm going to order mine.
Awesome.
I'll be in Kentucky in a couple of weeks, but I'm just go ahead and get it sent to the house and I already have it. And appreciate you letting everybody know that as well, for sure. Let you know it's that time, and then get both of them, get the football and the basketball.
Yeah, basketball we should have it out right usually first week of October, but like I said, already chopping wood, getting work on that. So it's
sounds good, man. Sounds good. Enjoyed it. Thanks again to Jenna Becerra hopping on, giving us some softball knowledge in the off season, and always fun interacting with her. Appreciate you, AG. We get Jay Whitlow back next week, and everybody take care and check us out next week for another episode of Believe in Kentucky.